social matters right here, and of course these are matters that are of interest to you. So today we discuss sexual education and reproductive health, and we just base our focus on what has been happening. I just talked about the social ills in in the previous segments that have been cropping up, and we asked today, how much do our girls, how much do our boys know about what it is that they can do to ensure that they protect themselves sexually? What much of education do they get that would arm them towards ensuring that they are safe, because the numerous cases that are being recorded right here in terms of teenage pregnancies are wanting, the numerous cases of rape, the numerous cases of course social ills that are happening in the home setup, especially at this time of COVID-19, is sad to note. So we have youthful figures on board this morning that will take us through their experiences and also tell us moving forward what is it that needs to be introduced to change this narrative. And joining me on studio this morning is Kevin Mokaya, policy advocate on NRH. Sorry, Veneranda, I should have started by introducing you first. Veneranda Kuboka, the founder Youth Changers in Kenya. And why I'm saying I should have introduced you is because we always say, ladies first. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hi.
You well? So much life. You well?
Yes, I am.
Good to have you.
Keeping up very well.
Right.
Thank
Good to have you also, and good to have you too, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
All right, and of course, straight to the point, what is so crucial, what is of so much interest about this subject of the day?
Maybe Veno, you'll go first.
Okay, good stuff. So there's been a lot of buzz around sex education, and if we actually need to introduce sexuality education to our teenagers and children. And just to point this out, that first and foremost, sexuality education is basically providing information that relates to matters around sex and relationships, but it's not just limited to that. This kind of information should be given in a non-judgmental manner. Number two, the information should be comprehensive. And other than it being comprehensive, it should be also culturally appropriate. Okay? So we've seen a lot of backlash from particularly parents and religious leaders stating that we should not have number one these conversations about sexuality education. And in my opinion, this is a hindrance. It's a hindrance to matters that relate to gender equality, because we cannot keep stating that our culture and our religious beliefs do not allow us to have conversations about sex. We need to break those barriers and be able to have honest and candid conversations about sex and sexuality, because our young people are suffering.
Just how deep should this go? Sorry to catch you. My question is, just how deep should this go? Because I'm assuming at least we get the basics, the general ones in school. If not in primary school, then in high school, as you're doing your biology studies, you're able to get this information. So just how deep should it go? Why do you sort of feel like maybe this is not addressed accordingly? Probably to loop in Kevin.
You see, this is a very timely discussion when we talk about sexuality education. Right now, you will look globally, approximately 34% of young people, and this I'm talking about the boys, can be able to express accurate knowledge of them preventing themselves from contracting HIV and other STIs. So it's very alarming. Where do we leave this other percentage? And it's a big percentage. You will see 2 out of 3 girls in most countries, developing countries like Kenya, don't have any knowledge of what is going through their bodies when they start menstruating. But where do they get this information? Might be in school. And how about the individuals that are out of school? There are other interventions that are involved in order for them to maybe disseminate, to get this information disseminated to them. So that's how deep it will get. It's not just about, again, information around it. We've seen research around the world that has been done that, display that once you're equipped with sexuality education in your own self, there's improved knowledge of maybe use of contraception, there's decrease in multiple partners, and as young as you would be, we cannot run away from the reality that these children, I will say children, young girls, young boys, have had their sexual debut as early as 10 years. And actually worldwide, you see, a child giving birth to a child. We have 9-year-old girl who's actually the youngest globally that has already given birth. So do we expose them to this information so that they can prevent them from teenage pregnancies, unsafe abortions, that's taking away a lot of young girls' lives. So that's how deep it can get. So as early as they enter into their sexual debut.
But just whose role is this? Because we've shied away from these conversations, like you rightfully put it, from a time immemorial. So who should be given the responsibility to ensure that they train, that they give this information to the children out there? Because as it is, yes, and I think you'd agree with me that sometimes, yes, there's that, shame on me feeling, especially when you are discussing this.
Well, I keep saying charity begins at home, and there are several aspects that determine the socialization of a child. And the first one, of course, is the family. We have religious institutions, we have the media, we have our peers, and we have the school. In my opinion, this issue is very systemic. Each of us have a role to play, okay? And it needs to begin from home, and the parents need to play their role in having honest and candid conversations about sex and sexuality. And this begins with basic things like naming private parts as they ought to be named, okay? And not giving them some very funny names that I've witnessed in the past and that I've heard in the past. It's very important for us to have conversations with children, letting them know this is an appropriate touch, this is an inappropriate touch, okay? Telling them that if someone touches you without consent in your private parts and naming them as they are, you should talk to me about it. This is what your private parts are called. The other thing, religious leaders also have a role in this because it's estimated, and we've had a lot of statistics about particularly unsafe abortions. And I keep asking myself, how many Christians do we have in Kenya? I think it's close to around past maybe 80% of the Kenyans are actually Christians, around that estimate, okay? But the number is pretty much high. And the cases of unsafe abortions that are reported are extremely high, slightly close to almost 500,000, okay? And where are these people? These people are in our religious circles. Right. Why are we not talking about sex? We've had instances where we've seen pastors and people who are affiliated to the religion and reverends and bishops they've been luring girls and young women to have sex with them. And these are the conversations that we are actually not having. We are not talking about matters around contraceptives, and we've gotten to a point where we've made sex look very demonic and satanic. And I keep asking myself, is there anything that is good about sex and sexuality? Of course, me and you know that there's something very beautiful about sex and sexuality. So we really need to promote that positive narrative. Again, the government of Kenya has failed children and young people.
Before we get to that, before we get to the government factor, let's first of all, exhaust this at the level of the family setup. And now that we're talking about, leaders coming to address these, religious leaders, family setup, moms, dads, and all that. When we talk about sexuality, we know that things that will always pop up, things that will come in mind. And this has been extended. I don't want to say evolved. This has evolved over time. These are things that come up every other day and you realize that there's gayism, there's lesbianism, some countries trying to, legalize this, so it doesn't look like, what you are looking at these people as though they are coming from space and all that. So when we have such kind of discussion, I mean, is it not too early, so that probably parents sort of feel like it is necessary to shield their children from such? Is it not too early to have conversations revolving around this at a very tender age with your girl who's 10, with your boy who's 9, Kevin?
Okay, you see, when you speak about it being early, it's very alarming, because at the end of the day, parents don't know what their children are going through.
Right.
Because they're not exposing them to this information.
Is it not an aspect of shielding them and protecting them from, what would be information that would hurt them or, would not be of benefit to them?
Most parents usually prefer abstinence-only programs.
Right.
Especially when we talk about sexuality and the sexuality of their young girls, their young boys. But, at their backs, when they leave for work, these children, these young individuals, these adolescents, are exposed to televisions, are exposed to social media. These are things that they want to explore because they are at an age that they want to explore more, They'll want to practice this. And what do we get at the end of the day? They will end up maybe exposing themselves to unprotected sexual activities. And what does that lead to? Teenage pregnancies.
Yeah.
Or if at all they wouldn't want their parents to know they're pregnant in some way, maybe they'll read through some quack somewhere, procure a self-abortion, and it's a lot of encompassing that comes with sexuality education. It's not just about giving the information, but CSE, or rather sexuality education itself, is explicit. It's talking about gender and rights. It's focusing a lot on gender and rights. We're looking at things to do with female genital mutilation. So it's a whole round thing. But as my colleague says, Veneranda says, if you as a parent, you wouldn't talk to your child about how they should protect themselves when they're having sex. I'm speaking about safer sex. That you already know they're having sex. But will you provide a condom to them, for example? You are protecting them from contracting HIV, other STIs, and even getting pregnant. So tunasema samaki mkunje angali mbichi, in Swahili. And charity begins at that very basic level from home. Even before we start talking about what the teachers are giving them, maybe about the school curriculum or something, and also other individuals who are out of school.
Right. Well, the cultures in a way would probably come into effect. I don't know what do you make of this, but do you suppose, yes, that the cultures have affected, and instilled fear in how we are approaching some of these issues? Like we said, also we do not overlook the aspect of gayism, we do not overlook the aspect of homosexuality, and like you started by saying that the very same press that we are having are sodomizing our young boys, and these occurrences that are happening, disheartening occurrences for that matter. So how do we strike the balance between running away from the cultures that have been there and equally embracing the change that is coming on board and sitting down our children to discuss these candid talks?
I think that's a very interesting question, and one of the things that I keep saying is context is changing. Okay. What was happening 5-10 years ago is not what is happening now. Context is changing, and parents need to keep up with that. If not, we are going to lose our young people as we focus on culture and religious beliefs. As a professional, I'm a child and youth psychologist by training, and I keep saying, and just to echo what Mokai has said, there's nothing like beginning sex education too early. And I'll give a very, very simple example. I have a niece who is 6 years old. And recently, actually, when she was 4.5, she came and asked my mom, "You are a girl and Gooks is a boy. Why are you guys sharing a bed? Why are you not sleeping alone like auntie? What is really going on?" Okay. So what I'm trying to bring across is children always present entry points through curiosity, especially if they would want to learn certain aspects. So as a parent, as a guardian, as a caregiver, use that entry point to be able to clarify certain aspects and give information in bits. We've been having conversations about about inappropriate, appropriate touch, how you call your private parts. So do it in bits based on their age and based on the different entry points that they actually present, okay? I wouldn't want her to grow up in a space like I did, where we didn't have this kind of conversations, yeah? Like, you can't talk about sex. It's seen as something that is dirty. It's seen as something that is very filthy. The narrative is extremely negative. I'd want that to actually have a change and break the silence around it, such that if something is happening to her, she can come back to me and confide in me.
Right.
And that's what is lacking between parents and young people. There's no intimacy, there's no connection between children and young people, such that when they are going through difficult moments or challenges, they cannot talk to them. They come to people like us and ask us a lot of questions online. I'm going through this, I'm struggling with this specific kind of addiction. What exactly should I do about it? And that's why we are saying that sex education seeks to talk about so many things. It talks about masculinity. It talks about factors of, STIs, STDs, it talks about sexual and gender-based violence, and if it happens to you, what exactly do you do with it?
Right.
It talks about relationships and what a healthy relationship looks like. It talks about safe sex. It talks about aspects of abortion and contraception. Just trying to ensure that young people are equipped with different life skills so that they are able to make informed decisions and choices. And studies have actually proved that young people who are empowered about their bodies, number one, delay pregnancy, they delay sex. Number two, cases of teen pregnancies are reduced completely. And they experience less distress, because when you're exposed to things like STIs, or probably you become pregnant, then the chances of you going through some mental distress is extremely high. So I think we really need to break the culture. We need to break the culture of silence and saying that sex is a taboo topic.
All right.
I am saying that it is okay for us to talk openly about sex and sexuality. It's very important, because we are losing our young people and we are losing our children.
All right. Well, as we try and run away from that, like you say, this would coming on board to, at least try and, probably lower the graph in that case, in terms of the cases that we experience today of, teenage pregnancies. But then the question would be, when we're talking about sex education, just how then do you get to balance this, especially between girls and boys? We having the same conversation. And I remember numerous times, even, in primary school, where, when those crucial moments used to get, and, girls are taken to a different class and boys are taken to a different class. Is this how it should be dealt with, Kevin, or it should be, a common approach towards things?
Okay, there should be a common approach when you're talking about sexuality education, because in a number of times we've had discussion of girl-child empowerment. But again, we always forget that there's a boy child involved in when you're talking about reproductive health, when you're talking about their sexuality. Because look at this, in getting expectant or getting pregnant, there has to be a man, there has to be a boy in question. So maybe in the villages, you will see like a girl will be sent away because she's expectant, but the boy who got her pregnant is still in school. And I'm not advocating for them to go home, you see, because you also have the back to school programming. It's a holistic approach. They're all involved, so they have to be taken through such a curricula together as a package. And again, it has to be age appropriate, like we usually say. The same way with the education system, what you're offering to standard 8 students, that is maybe grade 12 or something, it's not the same that you'll offer to class 5 individuals. The same with sexuality education.
And then
also looking on the same, you will see that a parent has to consent, especially when the boy or the girl has not reached, like in our case, 18 years, where we say the age of consenting. So if at all it's about matters to do with contraception, that a young girl would want to use a contraception, or rather a preventive measure for he or for her not to get expectant, then a parent will come into consent on her behalf. You see? So it's also involving the caregivers at that aspect, also the guardians and parents.
Right. Okay, and now that we're talking about that, someone still brings us to this point of gayism and so homosexuality and all that, and asks this question: at what point then should we start having this conversation? At what age do you sit down your kid, or should you wait for those telltale signs or those crucial moments when they question you or crucial matters, and then now you have to say that they are ready and you sit them down to discuss these ones? Kevin.
For me,
sorry, Kevin,
okay,
go ahead. Go ahead.
For me, I would feel as early as 2 years.
2 years.
Because that child or that young girl, she already knows that she has a private part. But you see what we say, like at that grassroots level, we say you would advise her to ensure that nobody touches her private parts. So, like in our days when you used to school in primary school, you will say they had a song, they had composed a song on singing that no one should touch my private parts, they are mine alone, things like that. So, as early as they understand their sexuality, so that if you're open to them, whatever happens on their daily activities, they can be able to give you feedback on the same. Like maybe my uncle did this and this. Then it will be very much alarming. Like maybe she might have been raped and you don't know, or something like that. So it's give you a go ahead to be, to expose your child at an early age that you can be able to make effective conversations on her own sexuality and reproductive health.
And in this case, you introduce bit by bit, or you just bombard them with all this information?
No, it's very sorry, Kevin. I'm really burning to answer that question. Sex education is very progressive and it's a continuous process. And I keep saying you don't even need to have a sit down to talk about sex. A child presents an entry point to a conversation, clarify, talk about it, leave it at that. Another entry point is presented. Talk about it, leave it at that. I'll give you another very interesting example, again with my little niece. My little niece and I had gone for swimming in some place. And my niece came and told me, Auntie, I've seen something. Boys have trunks. And I'm like, trunks? No, they don't have trunks. Boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. Okay? So they present an entry point, have a discussion about it, clarify, don't brush it off, give them the right information, wait for another entry point, give them information as it relates to that, but I keep saying you don't need to have a sit down. We are having a family meeting today, we are talking about sex education. It looks very structured and not very friendly to the young people. So let them present entry points and don't shoot them down, and have very honest conversations about it. And I'm even surprised right now she would see a campaign about teen pregnancy. She would call me and tell me, Auntie, I've seen a campaign like yours. Okay? So they relate with it and give them information bit by bit. Bit by bit. Do not bombard them with too much information because it becomes extremely confusing for them. And just to demystify something that many of us have within this country, sex education is not about lesbianism and homosexuality.
Now that's where we need to understand. That's my question, and that's what somebody has been asking all.
When we talk about sex education, we are not talking about homosexuality and lesbianism. Sex education is more than that. It's more than that. I am aware that it touches about matters around diversity, and not just focusing on sexual orientation. It focuses on our culture. It talks about our values. It talks about our social economic status. It talks about matters around disability and HIV status, and that is diversity in itself. And then now bring it the aspect of, faith and also aspect of different sexual orientation. But just to demystify that, that notion that sex education is about introducing lesbianism and homosexuality, it is completely not that.
And I think in this case then, we need to be treated as you would treat the young ones, and slowly disseminate this information to us. So that's an entry point for you to have another show, another session with us, so at least we get to learn these things bit by bit. But coming to that aspect of the government and the role of the government in this, and I know you were very bit about it, Veneranda, but let's first of all loop in Kevin. For ages, I have also had sessions with people, especially at this point when we are addressing teenage pregnancies, we're addressing, early marriages, FGM for that matter, and you could hear, most of these activists arguing that, there's not much that is being done by the government towards taming this. Just what is the role of the government, or where should the government come in to ensure that this is addressed?
Basically, you see, the government, I would say maybe, runs, the school's curriculum, the education system in itself. So what usually happened, especially during our time in primary school and some point high school, you will find that we used to have a curriculum called life skills, whereby you're taken through making healthy choices on your sexuality and your reproductive health. But right now, we are actually building on that curriculum and now, putting more information that's very much needed, especially when we're talking about this modernization thing that we're having right now, and we're talking about sexuality in itself. So the government in itself, right now, if I wanted to maybe disseminate information on sexuality education in a school or in a government facility that's offering education, maybe let's say like vocational trainings, I have to go through the ministries, the health ministry and also the education ministry, for me to get a go-ahead, a certification that they've actually gone through my curricula in itself, they've understood it, and they've agreed that I should disseminate such and such information in that institution. It's a process in itself, because they're actually encompassing, looking at it like, CSE as a whole, not being appropriate for these individuals to get this information in that school. So they'll water down maybe my research or something, or rather I want to be able to get access to this school system. So that's where the government comes in.
Right.
You see, and we also need a lot of legislation around, CSE, comprehensive sexuality education. Like maybe our teachers would be taken through curriculums where they're taught, they're trained on, giving sexuality education or providing sexuality education when they are also tackling the normal school curriculum. It should be part and parcel of that school curriculum. It shouldn't be done like, we will say after school, you're doing a co-curricular activity, maybe physical exercise or something. So they're built, these individuals are built through sexuality education that once they are done with the schooling system, they can be able to make informed choices, and this means they have accurate knowledge about their sexuality, and they can prevent themselves from the vices that we've actually looked at before.
All right, well, coming to you, yes, I know you're itching, so let's get to hear your take on why you think the government has disappointed us in terms of, addressing sexual education matters and also, reproductive health at large.
Yeah, I personally feel like the government has really failed the children and the young people of this nation. Number one, because one of their key mandates is to have legislations in place and ensure that those legislations are implemented, or the laws in place are implemented. And I'll give a very good scenario. We are currently having a lot of debate around the reproductive health bill, okay? And there's a bit of contention around it, basically because of two clauses. One, the issue of contraception and termination of pregnancy. And one of the things that legislators should do or should encourage the public to do, number one, is to ensure that they read the bill and understand the contents of the bills. Because I've noticed and we've taken note that many people who are against the bill, number one, they might really not have gone through the details or the nitty-gritties of the bill. Number two, they might disagree with certain aspects, but in my opinion, I feel we need to move beyond that, because if we are disagreeing on certain aspects, then we should sit down and state or ask ourselves, are there things that are beneficial about this bill? And are there things that we can actually change to make sure that we address the prevailing challenges that young people and women are experiencing in this country? My other issue is the cases that relate to teen pregnancy and the RIF as it relates to sexual violence in the country, particularly rape and defilement. In terms of arrest and prosecution, there's a gap. Okay, and again, that's the role of the government. There's a lot of gaps when it comes to arresting perpetrators of rape and sexual violence, and the increased number of teen pregnancies around the country, as we've seen highlighted by the different media houses, are as a result of those two things. So then my emphasis is that the government needs to ensure that we arrest and prosecute people who are defiling and they're defiling young girls, young women, and who are also raping our young women. And there's so much need for us to have conversations about sexuality education, particularly in our schools. And as we focus on opening schools in 2021, it's very, very imperative for us to ensure that we have this conversation, and this is something that the Ministry of Education needs to look into. We need to go beyond teaching the basics of biology and naming of private parts, and have detailed conversations about matters around menstruation, matters around relationships, matters around sexual violence, matters around masculinity and the role of boys in this madness, because that is also something that we are living out. We are not attributing this blame to the boys. It's unfortunate that the girls have to keep carrying the burden every now and then. They get pregnant, they are the problem. They've gone through rape, they are the problem. And these are the things that need to completely change in this country.
The boy child, I don't know why Kevin is not coming in to defend the boy child, because they've also been complaining that, for the longest of time, they bear the brunt of all this. Yet, sometimes it comes on board and, upon consent. But all the same, like I said, I think this is a conversation we'll have some more and more young people who are passionate about addressing the issues that affect us as a society. Kevin Mukaya, policy advocate on SRHR. Thank you so much. Veneranda Kuboka, founder Youth Changes Kenya. Youth Change Kenya or Youth Changes? Youth Changes Kenya. Yes, Youth Changes Kenya. Sadly enough, time is not on our side and we cannot expound some more because we started a little bit late. But all the same, we say not to worry, because we'll have more and more of this conversation. These are issues that keep cropping up. And it is only noble and fair that we have the conversations, constantly, so we are able to save the society. We are able to ensure that we save our girls and our boys out there. And on that very note, we get to wind up this particular session on sexual education, and we look forward to have more and more of discussions revolving around the same. My name is Linda Alela. It was great having you since morning. Thank you so much, Veneranda. Thank you so much, Kevin. We'll see you again some other time. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.